And with that said, here is the first session, Decoding Franchise Data from Data Mess to Data Yes. Take it away, Raakkel.
Thanks so much, Matt. Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be back at another CMO Peer Talks event. Today is all about your franchise data and what to do with it and what you're already doing. We would love to make this as interactive as possible. So feel free to interact with the chat and let us know your thoughts on what we're talking about. You can share your experience if you're doing something or not. As Matt highlighted, I run our customer success department at PromoRepublic, so it's my job to work with franchise partners day in and day out and to really keep my ear to the ground on all of the emerging trends and changes that we're all seeing. And I know it's super rapid, especially in the marketing space in multi-location businesses. So I'm really excited to introduce our next host, Conway. Can you hear us? And is your microphone working, I guess, more importantly?
As far as I know, it's working. Is it working?
Fantastic. Yes, we hear you.
Awesome.
Would you like to introduce yourself to our team today?
Sure. My name is Conway Briscoe. I am, as you can see on the screen, the principal franchise solutions architect at Transitiv. And at Transitiv, we exist to guide franchises through their unique data and analytics challenges. So yes, from data mess to data yes.
Love that. And our other panelist is Dan Monaghan from WSI. Dan, can you hear us or are you with us?
I am with you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you so much. Would you like to introduce yourself to our amazing panel that we have here today?
Sure. So I'm the founder of WSI, a digital marketing agency that we've actually franchised. So we have franchised agencies around the world. That was about 30 years ago. And then in 2009, I founded Clear Summit Group, which is a platform company of 7 brands now, mostly in the service industry, including WSI, Qualicare, Tutor Doctor, some of you familiar with, and a handful of other service-based brands. So that's a little bit about me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both, Dan and Conway, for being with us today. It should be a really vibrant conversation. So as for the agenda to follow along, we'll be covering the importance of being data-driven in franchising and reviewing the key indicators of what makes a truly data-driven franchise. Strategies for turning your marketing and operations into clear, actionable insights. And then effective ZOR and Z collaborations for the best data leverage. So really jam-packed. And like Matthew said, we're tight on time. So the first question that I'm going to pose to the audience is, who has already implemented or is currently in the process of implementing a data-driven response? You can throw in a thumbs up emoji, raise your hands. We would love to see it. We're going to try and make today as interactive as possible. So let us know what you're doing. And as we see on the screen, we have our first question. So if you want to rate the effectiveness of your organization, maybe from 0 to 10 in the chat, feel free to do so. But our first question is all about mastering the data to pave the way for franchise success. So what signs show a franchisee is truly data-driven, and what does that look like? So Dan, maybe I'd pass the microphone to you to open this up, and especially with the robust organization that you have both with WSI and across your other brands, we'd love to learn from you.
Yeah, so I think how we speak about our operations and how we speak about our business model, the extent to which we speak about it in data terms. In other words, to what extent are all aspects of our business model data driven, and do we have benchmarks, and how valuable and useful are those benchmarks? So for example, some companies will use measures like cost per lead, which I think is a very misleading measure. So oftentimes I'll say, like, if I'm speaking to a franchisor, especially an early stage franchisor, what are the KPIs? How do you measure success in your digital marketing? And cost per lead, when that comes up, it's often, it's a misleading, it's just a bad piece of data. And the reason is because it's very easy to find cheap leads, but the real measure is what's your cost of sales. And what you find in general is that most businesses that are not data-driven, they'll talk about cost per lead, but they don't really understand what their lifetime value of the customer is. They don't understand what their cost per client acquisition is. They don't understand their ROAS, their return on ad spend. So those are critical measures. And so, but then also looking at all the other areas of your operation. Is your customer service? Do you have KPIs and data around that in terms of your NPS? Do you have speed? Every business has a restrainer. We have different restrainers. For some businesses, marketing is your restrainer, how you bring new customers in the door. For other businesses, it's labor. How quickly can we get new staff onboarded to meet the client demand? For other clients, for other companies, it might be cost of sales, cost of labor. And so understanding what the restrainers are in your business, and then ensuring that you have metrics around those so that we know how our franchisees are doing in very quantitative ways, and have the ability to measure that. So I guess in answer to the question, it's, do we speak the language of data when we talk about our business, when we talk about our operations, and what success looks like? That's how I would indicate whether or not a company is data driven.
I think you hit a really important point there, in that there are different metrics to measure along different marketing lines, whether that is in your ads or acquisition or in that customer service aspect, which I think a lot of brands either focus on one or the other without doing it holistically. And what's really interesting is that we see that data-driven organizations are 23 times more likely to acquire customers and 6 times more likely to retain customers, which all, as we know, leads to profit. So that, hits exactly, Dan, what you said about understanding that lifetime value and the return on ad spend that you're getting, and what is your cost per acquisition, which is often miscalculated or misfocused on, as you highlighted. Passing the microphone to Conway, what about, from your perspective within Transitiv, how would you see the data-driven franchise?
We tend to talk about it in terms of where somebody is on their data journey. Like, are you aware that you have data? That would be like the very beginning of one's data journey.
Yeah.
And somewhere on the other side of the continuum, you have robust KPIs and reporting and dashboarding that's available to everybody all the time in real time. Most franchises are going to find themselves somewhere in between. So knowing where you are is half the battle. Like, can I access the data that's in the platforms that I'm using? And if I can, am I using that the way I really intend? Like Dan was saying, we can all look at cost per lead. That's going to mean something different from one business to another. And it may not even mean what you think it means. So how do we help people make sure they're accessing the data which is theirs in the ways that make the most impact on their business and on their team?
Yeah, and just to add to that, Conway, a lot of people don't realize that the most valuable asset they have in their business is not even on their balance sheet. We have goodwill, we have trademarks, we have inventory and things like that on our balance sheet, but what about our data? And this was true long before generative AI came along, which has now just magnified that. It's just 10x'd it. But when you think about what you can actually do with your data, whether that's through email nurturing campaigns in your franchise development or in your customer acquisition journey, but just understanding the value of that data and what that can mean to your business. And it's just further magnified with Gen AI, what we can do, mass personalization at scale, et cetera, with data.
Absolutely. And I think to bring both points together, to essentially summarize, I think it's what makes a really great data-driven franchisee, to combine both what Conway and Dan have highlighted. It's the consistent process of data utilization, whether you're just starting out your data journey and peeling back your numbers, or you're on the far end of the continuum where you have a lot of KPIs and dashboards, as Conway mentioned. So regularly checking data, analyzing it, and utilizing across the different levels and departments of the franchise, having maybe a tool or AI to rely on to help simplify that process and to ultimately make decisions off of the data. So it's not, trial and error or guesswork, that it is something that is really going to bring you to that next level based on, an educated hypothesis, so to speak. And obviously, as Conway mentioned, having clear KPIs and having something that matters to the business, like Dan highlighted, because we can easily get lost in tracking wrong metrics. So it's really all about finding the metrics that help move the needle of the business further down the line. So really, really insightful. Moving on to the next question in today's panel, we have: what smart strategies can franchisors use to turn marketing, CX, operational data, chaos into clear, actionable decisions? So it's essentially taking the gray and making it black and white. Conway, would you like to lead us off on this one?
Sure. So let's just say that to keep working off of where Dan started earlier, let's say your cost of sales is whatever it is for your franchise, your business. Step one is knowing that. Step two is, what does it mean that it's at that level? And then the step beyond, to me, in making clear, actionable decisions is, if I increase my cost per sale, what happens? If I decrease my cost per sale, what happens? Where do I project my revenue? Where do I project my costs? What does that data point mean to me, both now and going forward? And you're only going to be able to get through the chaos if you're very clear about what you're measuring. Because there are a billion things to measure. And my own personal mantra that I try to live by is less is more. Find the one KPI that drives your business more than any other, and laser focus on it. And make sure that anybody that comes into contact with it knows what it means, both in their own individual business and for your business as a whole.
Yeah, I was speaking to a franchise CEO once, and she talked about what she calls TIFF, the important few. In one of our business, actually several of our businesses, we have what we call the fundamental four or the fundamental five. So you could ask any franchisee in the Tutor Doctor system, for example, what the fundamental four are. They know that the fundamental four is your cost per lead, your conversion rate of lead to consultation rate, your conversion rate of consultation rate to sale, and your average sale value. That's the fundamental four. If you add a fifth to it, it would be lifetime value. But you can ask any franchisee in the system, what are the fundamental four and what are the benchmarks of the fundamental four? And they will all know that. You can ask any staff member. They'll all know what the fundamental four is, because that's the foundation of the business model. And so in franchising, I've sometimes said, I highlight the fact that if you look at a company like McDonald's, the Big Mac, the filet of fish, the quarter pounder, the Happy Meal, Ronald McDonald, breakfast at McDonald's, these were all franchisee ideas. So if we begin with the premise that many of our best ideas will come from our franchisees, and that, the Peter Senge, he wrote a book called The Fifth Discipline. And in that book, he said, the only sustainable competitive advantage that companies have is the speed at which they learn. So if we take this concept that our best ideas in franchising will come from our franchisees, and that for us, our competitive advantage as franchisors is the speed at which we learn compared to our competition, like how quickly are we learning? The next question is, how do we spot those learnings? How do we spot those opportunities? And so every business will have restrainers. And we just talked about that earlier, whether that's your labor cost, your client acquisition, et cetera. So what your restrainer is in your business. what are the benchmarks around that restrainer? And then how are we measuring that across our system? Because the best way to learn from our franchisees is to track their data and then look for the anomalies. We have this principle in our businesses we call think like Sherlock, where our home office team is always looking for anomalies, like your Sherlock, always looking for clues, because success leaves clues. So how is that franchisee getting an NPS rating that's 5 or 8 points above benchmark? How is that franchisee getting a labor cost that's 3% below benchmark? How is that franchisee getting a speed to service delivery ratio that's 9 hours faster than benchmark, right? So whatever your restrainer is, if you know what benchmark is, then you can look for all the anomalies in the system that exceed benchmark or are better than benchmark, and that's how we can learn. So instead of just putting our franchisees on stage at the annual convention because they're the highest performers, what about putting the ones on stage that have the highest net promoter score, or the ones that have the highest employee retention rate? And how are we learning from those people, and how are those learnings being shared across the network so that we can learn faster? And so I think the premise of wrapping data around all of your restrainers and then watching the network and benchmarking your franchisees is a really powerful principle. The one other thing I would say just on this topic of making actionable decisions, attribution from a marketing perspective is critical, and it's so often done incorrectly. So, for example, like, where did that lead come from? One of the worst. So often you'll hear, well, it was a homepage lead, or it came from organic. That is generally it's wrong. When people say, well, it's an organic lead, what do you mean an organic lead? Like, did we talk to the customer and find out how they heard about us? Just because they searched on Google doesn't make an organic lead. If they search for us on Google with our branded name, that's not using SEO. That's just Google doing their job. Your brand, even without SEO, is going to pretty much appear at the top if someone searches for it. So if we're not using proper attribution, we can make wrong decisions. So that, in terms of actionable decisions. So let me give you an example. Let's say you spend $2,000 a month on your SEO company. And so you spend $25,000 a year on SEO. And you get, let's say, let's say 4 franchise sales from SEO. And now you look at it and go, wow, our cost per sale with SEO is $6,000. Well, the reality is, if you really looked into those, you might find that 2 of them actually read about you in Entrepreneur Magazine and they searched your brand and they landed on your site. Somebody else heard about it through another franchisee who said, I love this business, I want to join. And maybe one was from organic search because someone was searching for your industry and your brand. But instead, what happens is that the decision is made, wow, SEO is really working for us. Let's double our budget with the SEO company. Now, we're in the SEO business, so I'm kind of like undermining, I'm telling you, you got to hold companies like us accountable, because just because you're getting leads through your homepage through Google doesn't mean they're SEO. And so we can make a wrong decision by doubling our SEO budget because we don't have proper data on attribution. So, and there's all kinds of examples where we can make wrong decisions if we have wrong data, but that's just a mistake that a lot of companies make.
Really well said, both Dan and Conway. I think the important pieces to remember is, as you've said, to collect and organize data from various sources into one place to ensure consistency and accuracy, and to benchmark that data across the network, where you can see how the franchisees are operating against each other, and to have leaderboards and evolve that data tracking and also to make sure that you are measuring the right KPIs for your organization. And, I really do think there's a lot of data noise that is out there. There's so many data sources. Dan's only listed a few, but what you really need to do is focus on what matters to you, as Conway said. So whether that is, having one KPI that's the driver across the organization, or having your core four, as Dan said, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just making sure that you are collecting that data consistently, having one place where it's populated, and are able to track it long-term across the location's performance, and to really evolve that customer experience, have those touch points, and bring that back all the way to consumer feedback and to have what they say. So Dan, you really did a great job of highlighting that entire narrative in one place. And same for you, Conway, really, really well highlighted. I think data literacy is that one piece that can be really tricky, but if we're training everyone on what to look at, and at least at what key metric that matters for everyone, it should be a great way to make all team members effective in ensuring that they understand how to interpret and use the data effectively to move, that the next phase of the data and KPIs that you're looking for. All right.
Can I add something before we go to the next one?
Definitely.
I've been in some of these meetings before, especially when I was in the beginning of franchising time, where I'd be sitting in these meetings and people would be saying, and it's this, 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 and it's this. And I would be the one sitting there going, I don't have access to this, and this yet. So what I just want to add is, wherever you are in the data journey, wherever it is, you're fine. Just take the next step in seeing more of your data, in centralizing more of it so you can access it, so that your company can take action on the data. If you don't have it all in place, you're not alone. That's just what I wanted to throw in there.
I think that's really well said. It's, we're talking about concepts at a high level, but if you're just starting out the journey, do not be afraid, Conway. I think that's a really important point, that nobody here should feel that they're behind the eight ball on anything. We want to make sure that we're giving you the tools to start having these questions and to start thinking about, okay, what is my North Star metric that I want to move my organization to? And if you have more questions, we are, all here. I know our speakers are really helpful, eager to connect, and, we all, our team members, always have time to answer questions. So I think, Conway, that was really an important point to highlight. On to one of our last questions here, which is, how do ZORs and Zs collaborate effectively to leverage the data? And what tools or technologies do you have in place to help them do it? Dan, would you like to kick us off here?
Sure. So I think the whole essence of franchising is about collaboration, right? And the fact that many of the best ideas, in fact, the vast majority of the best ideas are outside the building. In franchising, we often, and you'll see this on your team, is often thinking like life would be better or be so much easier if franchisees would just listen and follow direction. And yet the reality is, in many cases, the franchisees know more about the customer and know more about how the market is changing than we do. And so the question is, how are we collaborating with them? How are we listening and learning from them? So whenever we're implementing new ideas, we want to avoid this ivory tower mindset where, we've cooked this up at the head office and now we're going to just launch it. We always want to begin with a pilot. And that pilot always involves data. It always involves, like, how do we measure success? How do we know that this pilot is successful? And so a high level of collaboration is important with franchisees in that process. What we often find, especially in marketing pilots, is that the data can be misleading because, so let me give you an example. You're running a new advertising and marketing campaign, And so the leads are coming in, you've got a cost per lead, you're measuring, and then but it's not materializing into sales. And so now you say, well, the cost per lead is good, but the cost of customer acquisition is bad, or the cost of revenue is bad. But are you actually listening to those calls? And so we deeply engage into in the collaboration piece. We're listening to those phone calls. And lo and behold, we find out the phone's not getting answered. Or the phone is being answered, but it's being really managed poorly. Or the dog's barking in the background. Or the person didn't close correctly or follow the 7-step process. And so oftentimes you find that the restrainers are operational and not actually marketing, but you don't know that unless you're collaborating deeply with them, listening and learning at what's going on deeper into the process. So I would say that's a critical part of it, is going deep on your pilots and learning from the franchisees. I often talk about 3 legs of a stool. You've got people, you've got process, you've got leads, right? So on the front end of the sales process, when we're bringing new customers on, you got leads, you got a people, and you got a process, and that's all tied together with technology. So technology allows us to measure which parts of those is broken. Is it the people? Is it the process? Or is it the actual marketing, the leads themselves? So anyhow, all that's important when it comes to collaboration.
So that second question there about what technology will help you do it, the answer is there are many technologies that can help you do it. But there are some things I think everybody should keep in mind when you're both trying to maximize your current technology and you're vetting other platforms you might want to use. A big one is, what's your access to your own data? Can you get out of the technology you're using what you need to make the decisions you need to make? Can you get to a granular level like Dan was just talking about? Can I get down to where it's actually happening and be able to assess what's causing that restrainer, that issue that's keeping me from working the way I need to? Another aspect is really more the first question. I think it's incumbent on franchisors to prove out the value of quality data entry by a franchisee and how it turns into a great return on investment of marketing dollars. To use Dan's option from before about attribution, if you're not doing attribution correctly, you're probably spending money in the wrong categories. But the only way to know that is if you start doing attribution correctly and entering those things into a CRM or other platform that you're using, and you can get that back out of it to bounce it against your financial data to know where you're getting the most bang for your buck. So to me, both of those really go together. You need both. You need data quality from the entire network, and you need access to your data to be able to make decisions.
Yeah, that's a great point, Conway. And I would just, one point to definitely take away is that what most people don't realize today is that the value of their first party data is going to explode exponentially with AI. So what you can do with the data in your CRM and how you can do, mass personalization at scale in the not too distant future is going to be really significant. So capturing all that source data, that first party data, in the CRM is going to pay dividends for you in the future.
Absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think this is a really exciting space because we do have so many different avenues of technology emerging as we go with AI and with different platforms to help Zors and Zs alike really understand the data and the metrics. And I think just to bring this full circle, I think highlighting the regular communication with franchisees and making sure that they understand what metrics matter to the business and how they can grow, as well as at the Zor level, utilizing these platforms that do enable you to have the dual view can be really helpful to share that data in real time, and to have joint analytics, projects, processes, and to really take on what Dan highlighted about focusing on the franchisee, their ideas, and how to help them grow will really enable you to get the right tools, like Conway said, and to make sure that you're auditing and piloting and testing everything that is out there. So that highlights, the different technologies that you have, whether you're leveraging business intelligence tool like Tableau or Microsoft Power BI to visualize and generate these insights, or you have marketing automation platforms like Conway highlighted, or you're using AI and testing out new emerging trends that are out there. I think there's so many ways to do it that it's absolutely fantastic to sort through that to see if, as Conway highlighted, what data do you have access to, what metrics matter to you, and how you can get that message across the whole network. So it's really taking that and making it actionable, like we've highlighted before.
I love that wrap up, Raakkel. Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely amazing panel. We do have about 5 minutes, so please, for the guests in the audience, go ahead, grab some coffee, some quick water, or if you want to stick around through the 5 minutes, if it's okay with the panel, I think it'd be a good time for some questions. If anybody has some, go ahead and unmute yourself at this time, and we'll sit here awkwardly until somebody asks at least one question. So.
Feel
Love
free
that.
to
Thank you for that.
unmute yourself if you have a question, or you can throw it in the channel. Both Conway and Dan are great minds, so this is an amazing time to pick their brains.
Hey guys, it's Tim Tang with Hughes. I was wondering if you could maybe just share in your experiences kind of where the low-hanging fruit is, where a lot of franchisees are just getting started in many cases. When you talked about the what was it, the fundamental five and the likes. In your experience, kind of if they could only do one thing or needed a starting point, where would you start?
From my perspective, I would start with NPS, right? The Net Promoter Score, assuming they don't have anything, because, so integral with the brand is the customer, right? And it all begins with the customer. So we can learn a lot by those franchisees that are delighting the customers. And, that old Peter Drucker quote that we can't manage what we can't measure. This really gives us the ability to learn faster when we can see who is delighting the customer.
I would say almost anything beyond the standard stuff people tend to focus on. Like, I think what happens most of the time at a franchise event is the one who sells the most is the one who gets recognized. Wouldn't it be fun if the one who got recognized was the one who had the most net profit at the end? There's all kinds of data points you can access. So what are the ones in your particular business, and yours is a particular business, whoever you are, that really drive things forward? And I think you'll find it's not always gross sales.
I couldn't agree more with you, Conway. I think, those are some amazing points. It brings to mind this conversation. We do have about 5 minutes here. So for anybody who just joined or is still in the audience, please feel free to step away for a second. We do have an amazing panel coming up in about 5 minutes. But on attribution, sometimes I think as we get to the end of a sale, right, and we actually get money into the bank, at some point, it's really easy for that data to get lost along that journey. So how can we as business leaders or business owners do something about like that transition, right? From marketing to a lead to a sale to then money in the bank, and properly attribute that? At what point? I think it's like the last mile. It's a last mile question, right? What's something super tactile and effective as a business leader or entrepreneur that we can do to help make sure we don't lose that little pivotal piece of attribution data?
it's a really, really important point, Matt. And I'm always surprised by the number of companies or business leaders who actually, there is this big gap between your marketing system and your CRM. And you can, through Google Analytics, and there's various tools, through using UTMs, you can do that through, tagging something in your marketing with a UTM through to your CRM. But let me give you an example. In Tutor Doctor, we not only know what our cost per lead is or cost of sales are through Google PPC, but we can tell you which keywords are producing the highest revenue. So for example, I can tell you that the keyword physics tutor produces significantly more revenue than English tutor or French tutor. Now most of our competitors, and don't go telling any of our competitors, but most of our competitors don't know that. And so we're able to spend a lot more to acquire a physics tutor customer than they are, because they're looking at numbers like cost per lead, or even if they're sophisticated, they're looking at cost of sales from Google AdWords, but they don't know cost per keyword against revenue. And so the lifetime value of a customer who searches for physics tutor is going to be much higher. So all that to say, do you have that granularity around your attribution? And if not, just talk to your technical people or your marketing agency or whatever and say, like, I need this as a business leader. We don't have this and I need it. So anyhow, that's a great point, Matt. Bridging your marketing system through to your CRM is critical.
For me, there's another piece to it. We've talked about it, but we haven't named it this way. It's process, process, process. It's making sure that you have processes in place in your organization that take things from one part of your business to another. And those processes are known and followed by everybody in your business. That's going to sound ridiculously like the data journey I just described. That's because it is. So you can have processes, having them down and followed by everybody is another level. And then having them even known beyond your interior team to actually your customers goes even beyond that. That to me is how you bring all this together as well.
I love it. I'm gonna print it out. I'm gonna put it on a shirt. Process, process, process. Right. And on the front, it's gonna say attribution. So that way you get both sides of this story here. So it's 12:45 now. I hope everybody made it back from whatever it is that you're doing. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to any of our guest speakers or our host. And if you can't get in touch with them, get in touch with me and I will get you in touch with them. Unless, of course, you're trying to sell them something, because then I have to ask them if I can put you in touch first. But anyway, so let's move on to the next point here. And this is just highlighting that PromoRepublic is, of course, one of those really awesome data tools that helps to bring all the data together. And if you missed Alex in the beginning of this presentation, if you reach out to him, he'll be reaching out to every single one of you. At the end, he can explain how PromoRepublic can support you on your data journey. We already did this. I skipped ahead.